Recovery from Anything features real stories that some listeners might find distressing. Check the show notes for specific content warnings and information on support services.
I realised, oh my God, like there's been a lot of stuff that I've felt a lot of pain and sadness about, but I've never shown or told anyone because I didn't know how to. Like, I never learned how to be sad or say those sad emotions out loud.
Welcome to Recovery from Anything. I'm your host, Abby Feltham. On this podcast, we cover a lot of hard-hitting topics. Issues that reside on the outskirts of society, the kind of stuff that nobody else wants to talk about, but undeniably exists. Some are deeply traumatic events through which people have persevered. Others are complex disorders that once caused chaos in our storytellers' lives, but they have since learned how to manage, even using them as a source of gratitude in their lives. But not everything we must recover from has to be as severe as crystal meth addiction or disrupting as bipolar. Recovery is not limited to traumatic experiences. It can also apply to simpler daily issues in life. It's the process of healing and returning to a state of well-being after facing challenges or difficulties, whether they're major traumas or everyday stressors. For example, I could do an entire solo episode on recovering from burnout. I've recently left my job at a marketing agency to become self-employed and focus on content creation and podcasting full-time. Lucky me. Over the last 2 years, I have been juggling so many responsibilities that both my mental and physical health began to be severely impacted. I was staying up until 2 a.m. to work on my latest project, only to be in the gym at 6. I would wake up crying because I was so overwhelmed, then spend the day draining what little energy I had until I was but a shell of the person I used to be. Things are getting a little bit better now, a bit more settled, but I'm still in the process of recovering from the toll that lifestyle had on me. This week's storyteller did endure a major event that left her struggling and in need of healing, a mental breakdown at the age of 19. But what got me thinking about the more everyday situations from which we can recover is one of the causes of her breakdown, emotional suppression, which many of us deal with on a daily basis. We may be conforming to societal expectations, avoiding vulnerability, or escaping from the overwhelming intensity of certain feelings. We may need to recover from a short stint of emotional suppression that caused slight ripples in our lives, or, like this week's storyteller, recover from the long-term consequences, damages to our mental, emotional, and even physical well-being. Here's Jessica Thompson.
I'm half Finnish and half Scottish. I grew up mostly in Finland. I came here when I was about 5. I was born here as well, but we moved away quite quickly. We moved to London when I was like 3 months old, and then we moved to Indonesia. And yeah, my like first childhood memories are like in Jakarta, in like just, living there for like 1.5 years. I was quite happy. Like my parents always said that I was very happy as a kid. I would be the kid in a public transport who made friends, and then we would go to their house and I would be the one connecting our families. And then my parents split up. With like most kids who've gone through that, it ends up kind of having an effect on you more or less. For me, it was kind of shutting myself off and my emotions because I didn't want to burden others. Because, when you're like 5 years old and your brain has a capacity of a 5-year-old, you're like, okay, I don't want to make the situation worse. Because it was, I could sense that people are struggling and they're sad and they're going through a lot of stuff. So I won't tell about my feelings. I didn't really feel like I had the space to be sad and emotional. For me, it was also like the kind of culture that I think it's mostly here in Finland, but I would also say that maybe in the UK as well a bit, about how girls are sometimes or quite often brought up to kind of be good girls and, you know, don't really think about yourself, just think about others and always kind of be smiling and nice. So, which kind of puts a really small box in where you can be sad and angry. And also the fact that I thought that there's too much going on when I was a kid and my parents split up. I had one sister as well. She's 1 year younger than me. And we moved to Finland because of the split up and everything. It was a tough time for sure because like my mom hadn't been in Finland for a long time and she basically moved here with 2 kids and she went to school again and she like studied economics and stuff. And I remember her like really struggling back then, but like she always was like a really kind of strong role model. Like she tried to keep it together. When I really started to struggle, I was in school and I felt like I couldn't deal with my anxiety. Like I remember I could barely go to class and I would skip certain classes and I would have this like spot above my city that I live in and I would like go there and just look at the scenery and just be like really numb and just like I still remember the spot. I used to go there like every week and just sit there and that was like the only place where I felt like a bit of peace. Like my anxiety was really bad. I was like overwhelmed with negative thoughts about myself and this like horrible feeling that I could not get away. Like it didn't matter what I did, if I went to like my favorite places or spent time with my favorite people, like it was always there. Now that I look back, it was because I didn't know how to cope with it at all. I didn't even realize I had no awareness of mental health and taking care of your mental health. I didn't even really understand what that meant. I was like, is that like to do with headaches or like what does that mean? I went through 19 years of not really talking about my emotions or even like knowing that they were there, and I saw myself like abusing alcohol. In the UK, it's very much part of the culture. It's very much part of the culture here. So it was also almost like a joke, I think, in my friend group that Jessica, because she's like half Scottish and half Finnish, like she can drink like a fish, you know, and it was like a joke kind of thing. One of my good friends, she said, oh, like, Jessica, I've been to therapy. Have you maybe thought that you should go too? And that was like the first time ever that I thought like maybe my mental health isn't perfect. Like up until that point, I thought never in my life has there been an event that or anything that could cause me to need to take better care of my mental health. Without me realizing it, I think that was the first time that someone outside actually saw my suffering and my suffering mental health for what it was and said something about it. I think the kind of most sad thing about my struggle now thinking back is like how alone I felt with it. I think that is because of the culture and the society that we live in, is that when people struggle with their mental health, that it just feels like they're so alone. And it's so sad because now that I'm kind of brave enough to open up about it and I talk about it very actively, it's like almost every person says, oh yeah, I can relate. And it's like, why did I not know that before? I ended up going to a school psychiatrist and I said something like, I still didn't believe that it was anything with me or my family or my past or anything. I just thought like it was something going on in my 19-year-old life. I was like, oh, like I've just split up with my boyfriend and I'm having struggles with that. And then I thought that was the issue, but the psychiatrist straight away, she went like, no, like I think like something's happened in your past, like bring it on. And I was like, no, like I don't think so. But then when we got to talking, I realized like, oh my God, there's been a lot of stuff that I've felt a lot of pain and sadness about, but I've never shown or told anyone because I didn't know how to. Like I never learned how to be sad or say those sad emotions out loud. Like it was just not a skill I had. I went there for like 4 months. Unfortunately, my school psychiatrist, she did a good job, but like I don't think, looking back, I don't think she like realized what I was actually struggling quite hard, and she didn't guide me into more help. And she ended up giving me some advice that I didn't really agree with. She said, like, you can just cut like family contacts. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I think I need to like work with me. And, you know, we didn't just see eye to eye. So I ended up just like I didn't go anymore. I stopped it. And then I was just left with my own, you know, way of dealing with my problems again, which was like drinking and partying and trying to have fun and just like existing, I guess. And I did graduate and everything, but ended up not getting into uni and stuff because of that. And it really kind of put big breaks in my future and all of that, how that was going to build up. That was a really kind of messy time after that. I always wanted to move to London after I got my like basic education done here. And I always wanted to be in acting. Acting was like a huge part of my life. And obviously I thought like London is a great place to do that. So I moved to London. The first half year that I spent there was like really bad for me. Like I just had a lot of anxiety. I think I had this like dream for a long time of like what the London acting scene would be like for me. And I imagined like red carpets and all of that stuff. And the reality was that I was like working at Garfunkel's in like Leicester Square with minimum wage and realizing that rent is like 3 times higher than it is here in where I live in Finland. So yeah, that was a slap in the face. And I became a waitress basically because I thought like, well, that's what actors do when they are not actors yet. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. I struggled for half a year like that, and I was lucky enough that my dad lived there and he opened up his home for me. So I lived with him, which was fun, but like still I didn't really enjoy my life at that point at all because it was not what I wanted at all. So I ended up moving back to Finland, and that's when I think I my mind got like really depressed. I wasn't diagnosed with depression or anything, but all of these dreams that I've always had, I went to chase them and I had to come back here. And it was like, I ended up being in a school cafeteria washing dishes. And I was like, what is my life? It was like such a low point because I still had no skills to cope with my mental health, which also meant that I blamed myself for it a lot because I had no idea that other people were struggling like me, which is, I mean, my struggles are quite common actually, but I had no awareness of that. I had no awareness of how to take care of it. I had no awareness that it is not my fault, and or then it is, but it's not like to blame on me. So yeah, then after coming back to Finland, I kind of got myself back together a bit, and then I thought I'd move back to London. This time I moved with some Finnish friends into a flat and lived there for 1 year. Imagine like 21-year-olds living in London and just like trying to be actors and actresses and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And it kind of felt like Friends, the show, but it wasn't like that at all. Like, it was crazy. I started to feel happy at that time after a long time. Like that was one of the happiest times of my life for sure, but I still didn't really feel happy inside in a weird way. So I was like happy in a sense, but not happy in a sense, because I still had the same struggles. I had just replaced that with something fun, which was my community, which I was living in. Again, I jumped from job to job. I was actually lucky enough to get a job from the West End. I was working in Les as one of the people who checked tickets and stuff, like an usher. But yeah, my jobs didn't last because I didn't really care for them. I was never into it, and I wasn't like motivated enough to pretend to be into it. I had like 4 jobs within a year in London, and then I decided that I want to go to uni and I want to come to Finland to do that because education is free for me here. I made the decision to move back here again, I got my own apartment for the first time where I just lived. I've always had roommates before that. And I think that was like a really big thing with my healing, because for the first time I had my own space where I could just be as sad and as happy and everything in between as I could. Having that own space really gave me a cocoon to kind of rest in. And then I started the journey to go into uni, which is actually still kind of going on, but it was also a big part of my healing, because I, for the first time, was actually excited to do studying and become academic. And I realized also through my slow process of getting to know myself that I actually have so many more skills than just acting, because I always just kind of thought like, no, I'm just like an arty person. But now I believe that you can be into a lot of stuff, like you don't just have to pick one lane. So yeah, then I got into like economics, because I felt like that area in the world is quite damaged at the moment. I think if I could maybe study it, I could do some good stuff there. I think that was really motivating for me to think that I could make some big changes, even though it might never happen. But just working towards that was so rewarding at that time, because I'd felt so shit about myself for such a long time. That kind of started to become my project. Before, I just thought I had this like one career. I didn't even think I could do anything else than art, because I know I love art and it's a big part of who I am. That's always been, ever since I was a kid and my parents split up, it's been a huge therapeutic tool for me. But later on, I realized also that I have a lot more that I'm into, like geography and plants. Like I have so many houseplants and dogs. I love dogs. All those things were something that I didn't know about myself before. So it's really great that I've also gotten to know me in a totally different way. It's kind of like, first you had the picture of yourself, which was like this drawn picture that looked like one of those lined drawings that maybe a 5-year-old did. But now that I've gotten to know myself, it's the same picture, but it's an oil portrait that's so much more detailed. And obviously I'm kind of still the same person, but with a lot more edge and color in the picture.
So now you're on your healing journey and you're processing your feelings in a different way. Because it sounds like before, you really found it difficult to kind of express yourself and to kind of process your emotions and stuff. Now you're on this journey, what's that like for you? What does that look like for you?
It's not about how you process your emotions necessarily, but it's more of just the fact that you process them. Because like before, I didn't even process them. Now I have a lot of tools that I've gotten from therapy and people around me, that I know how to deal with their thoughts and I know how they work. I understand that, thoughts cause big emotions if you just let them kind of roll around in your head. I've learned a lot about how to love myself and how to kind of force that positive talk into my head, because all of that negative thought that comes from within and all of that negative self-talk that we have, it's, for me at least, it's just been about replacing it with positive. So for me, it hasn't really even trying to shove the negative away, because in a way that's what I did for a long time. I just like shoved the negative away. So it doesn't really work for me to shove it away. I just had to like really build a lot of positive stuff to balance it out. Biggest shift in getting to know myself was just realizing that this takes a lot of time. Before I was kind of like, okay, if I get to understand more about this mental health and I study it for like 1 month, then I'll be healed and that'll be it. But it was when I realized that it's kind of like training at the gym, when you have to do it every week, continue doing it, and if you stop doing it, it'll go bad again. So when I realized that you have to look at it like a hobby, like, okay, I have to invest time into this, realizing that it's not just something you can look into for one summer and then forget about it. It's something you have to kind of even forced sometimes. It's not something you want to do all the time. Sometimes it's a thing that is really great, but sometimes it's kind of like, oh, I don't have the energy or the motivation to do this. But that's when you still have to go and do it, kind of like, exercise. It requires a lot of just blindly believing in yourself. I mean, in the beginning, people say it works, but if you don't really have the proof, and if you're already kind of struggling, I mean, it's all about believing in yourself, which is so hard. And it's especially hard when you don't see anything in your life that points into that direction. So I don't know. I don't know what it was within me that I was like, okay, maybe I'll just try. And I think I was kind of like thinking, okay, I'll try, but if that doesn't work, I'll just like become a party girl for the rest of my life or something. I think I'm really lucky to have had the journey that I did, because it could have ended up so much worse, and I know that. I also, which is really great with my healing, that now that I've been kind of healing, I'd say for like 5 years, well, more or less, I mean, depends how you want to look at it, but it's great when you have those feelings that I've had like when I was like 10, I get feelings that are full of hope and excitement about my future, and they're all because of me and what I see about myself now. And then when you get that feeling and you kind of, the second thought is like, oh my God, like I felt this way last time, like 15 years ago. Like that is, I think, one of the greatest feelings when you start to heal from something like that, is like you get all of these feelings and emotions that have just been like locked away for such a long time, and you didn't remember that they could even exist.
So there's a question I'm asking everyone. What does recovery mean to you?
Recovery for me means finding yourself and becoming your best friend.
You've been listening to Recovery from Anything. I'm your host, Abby Feltham. If you enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review the show, and join the community on Instagram @RecoveryFromAnything. You can find out more about this week's storyteller or submit a story of your own on our website, recoveryfromanything.com. Thank you for listening.